So like one of your family members is on
Mm,
one track, just one person, but then you have
yeah.
five people over here who could also get hit. So there's two different tracks. So you could either pull the lever of the train to hit five people or to hit your family member. And it's like, what would you do? You know?
Hello, everyone. This is Out of the Box podcast where Steele and I, your hosts, get to talk about outside of the box ideas. Today, we have a really awesome topic. We're going to be talking about morality, and this is a topic that's kind of coming from the last podcast that we had, which was about the existence of God. And so, if you haven't seen that video already, you can go down below, and we'll have a link for you. But we'll get into it. So still, let's kick it off.
Sounds good. All right. Yeah, dude, this is going to be an interesting topic for sure. The main issue of morality, I guess, like me and you as Christians and Catholics, we believe in objective morality from like a divine creator. Objective in the sense that the morality, the moral values that we follow, are we consider to be universal because they are created by this higher intelligence, and universal in the sense that they apply to, I guess, in the sense that we see it as applying to the world, I guess, uh,
Hmm.
if you want to put it that way, since that's kind of like what objective means. It kind of means of, in terms of like, you want to go objective versus subjective. Objective is like, I guess, yeah, it's kind of like applies to everyone. I guess I don't know how else to explain it in terms of morality, at least. You know, like you want to say it in terms of science, it's like an objective fact. You know.
Yeah.
Whereas like subjective morality, otherwise called a moral relativism, is morality based on your own feeling about morality, kind of based on your own individual, more or less, opinion of what morals should be and what moral values should be. And as I understand it, moral relativism believes that morality comes from the individual instead
Hmm.
of instead of like an objective universal morality from
That
either
applies to
a
everyone.
god or a culture or a group of individuals, you know. So
Hmm.
yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, I definitely see that becoming a reality. What it is a reality nowadays that it's instead. I think people are trying to avoid conflict or trying to not conflict, but a debate over something. And so, in order to do that, they're like, okay, well, you believe that, and I believe what I believe, right? You can believe that the sky is blue, and I can believe that the sky is green, right? And I think that in itself, creates a problem in morality, right? Because kind of like you were saying, we as Christians believe that there is some morals, and the at least the Catholic Church talks about the natural morals, right? That they're more like naturalist in the sense that if it's created in humans and in nature, and you find it in animals, there's innate things in nature that give the world order, right? And that's actually what the Catholic Church believes. But spanning outside of that and going into just like, well, everyone's right. Well, if everyone were right, that would be crazy,
Chaos,
because
yeah.
yeah. Well, what if we have a maniac and he thinks that killing people is moral?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah. And
then
that's what I want to get
how
into.
do you defeat or how do you defend your point of view that everyone should believe what they want to believe?
Right,
Well,
dude.
I
And exactly, that's exactly right. Because there's so many moral dilemmas that could come up, like you know, murder. But like,
mhm.
what are some
And
instances
you
of
can
like
justify
killing
it.
someone? Yeah, like we'll give some examples of like, uh, I guess moments where you could justify murder just in society. Not even, it doesn't have to be your point of view, just like in general.
Well, I mean, you see it almost every day. I mean, I know abortion has been approved in a couple places, but that in itself, is a moral issue, right? In itself, because you're talking about whether it's alive or not, and, naturalistically you would say, well, if it's beating, if it's given life, in itself, then it's alive, right? And killing it would just, rid, take away that life, which means that in itself, there is something wrong in that, right? There is something that does not make sense. If you're trying to give life and the purpose of it is to give life, then killing it means that you are, going against that purpose that it was given, right? And so I think that's more of the naturalistic side of things, right?
Right.
Um,
I can think of some other examples of murder too, like just in general. And I'm not even saying whether I agree or not. I'm just kind of objectively giving some
yeah,
examples.
yeah, that
Like
makes sense.
so basically like we could take the death penalty for example. I know some Catholics are against that.
Hmm.
I consider myself against it myself. But it's something that society, at least a fair amount of society, enough to where it's a law,
Yeah, if you
agrees
want
that
to
you can
die, like
justify, yeah, you kind of justify murdering someone if they have done enough bad things in life to, I guess, deserve it.
mm,
And then
yeah,
there's a war, war with soldiers who, and, nothing against, I definitely all the respect to the world for people who fight and die for our country. But, it's just another example, like of all the different types of killing, I guess, that some are considered murder and some aren't. And the moral relativists would argue that they would use that as an example to say that, well, if it's okay to kill someone in war, if it's okay to kill someone with a death penalty, then why can't? Then that means murder is not a universal moral law, I guess. That's kind of what
yeah,
I think they would argue.
yeah. Then that would mean that, a person around the world is eligible to be killed if and when these situations happen, right? So but I think in itself, uh, I'm trying to think about it objectively, like
Right.
without any bias, right?
Yeah, it's
But
hard. Yeah,
it
it's not
it,
easy.
it almost sounds kind of hard to defeat. To say like, well, this person should receive death because they killed somebody else, for example, right? Who sets the standards? And I think nowadays the countries have been the ones that tend to decide whether one
Right.
is destined for death, right?
Yeah,
If
no,
they
and
do
yeah,
this.
exactly. Yeah, it's become a lot of politicized. I think a lot of things become politicized and in different ways on different sides and whatever, and that can complicate it as well. And because you're right. I would argue that politics, lawmakers, and people in a society define the man-made laws that we follow, like the death
Mhm.
penalty.
Yeah, yeah, because in itself, there, like you said, there is man-made laws, but are all man-made laws moral
Yeah,
or
like you were
just?
talking about the last podcast about some laws being arbitrary, like having to go
Yeah.
all the way around to go to the bathroom. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. There is some laws where, like some people pass red lights all the time. That's a very good sign, it says stop, and
yeah.
sometimes people just pass that stop sign, and don't, maybe they didn't see it, you know, um, but they say, well, if it didn't kill anyone or if it didn't do any damage, then it's okay, right?
So would that
So there's
make
that gray area.
yeah, and so does that mean that man-made laws, the laws that are created by a government or society, are those subjective? Would that mean that they're subjective since they're kind of like created by human beings, you know?
I guess some of them can have an objective truth, but some of them are subjective.
I would argue that the only objective part about the law is that it's universal only in the United States. Like for example, we follow the laws of the speed limit or not running a stop sign. Or well, let's
Hmm.
just go with speed limit, right? So let's say the speed limit on one highway in America is 35 miles an hour or whatever, but in another country on the same highway or a similar highway, we could say the speed limit is 45, 10 miles higher.
Yeah.
So it's not, I would argue that in that sense, it's not objective because if it were objective, then the speed limit would be the same in both countries on the similar highway. And so
Hmm.
you can apply that to different metaphors and stuff, but I think it's an interesting idea.
I guess you could turn it objective if, you know, if you say, well, the highway, if there's a way to test it, like let's say, well, this highway was built with a certain angle, and if people go past this speed limit, then that could cause, you know, death to not to that person, or they could, you know, if they go too fast on this curb, they could, you know, end up going out of the curb if they're going too fast. And but the other highway, maybe it's just like a straight line. So okay, yeah, you can go 10 miles faster, right? And
Right.
so I guess like, you know, people change the speed limits depending on, you know, the curves and stuff like that. Maybe engineers and professionals have figured out a formula to understand like, oh well, you know, at this speed limit, you know, people are going to be able to make that curve. And in the laws of physics, you know, it says that, you know, that'll be enough speed to not fly off the curb
Right.
or hit
And that,
somebody trying to do a turn.
yeah, and I know
That could turn into an objective truth.
that probably plays a role likely, and I know also that they lower speed limits in areas where there's like a lot of car accidents, so they can go based off statistics. And technically, well, you know, you can get really into a rabbit hole of statistics because I know some people argue that, you know, even if, especially if you study it really deeply, that you can't even trust statistics all the time either. It depends on the source. It depends on how the statistics were conducted. But going on another, I guess diving deeper into philosophy, have you ever
Mhm.
heard of the? Here's a really good moral dilemma challenge, right? Have you ever heard of the dolly tram dilemma? You know, with the train.
I yeah, I think I yeah, I think I heard it.
Yeah, where it's like one person's on one track, right? And
Yeah,
but then
and
there's
somebody
like
could
five.
die.
There's
You have
five.
to
So like one of your family members is on
mm,
one track, just one person. But then you have
yeah.
five people over here who could also get hit. So there's two different tracks. So you could either pull the lever of the train to hit five people or to hit your family member. And it's like, what would you do? You know, and
Yeah.
what does morality tell you to do in that situation? It's a really hard question.
Hmm. Yeah, because in one occasion you would save five people, then in the other one you would save a
Yeah.
family member.
If you go by your
So you have
bias,
there's a
then yeah,
degree, I guess I don't know if there's a degree of like how much worth is there in one than the other, because
yeah,
you can say also like, well, who are those five people, right?
yeah,
Well, are
I
they
agree.
just, you know, robbers who ended up, you know, falling into the track, or are they you know, are they doctors that save lives, or are they priests, are they really important people in society, like,
Right.
and then you can scale, I guess, the value of like, okay, how much worth, you know, but in a split second, if it's like, okay, they tell you in 2 seconds it's gonna hit your mom or it's gonna hit five other people, well then you're like, oh shoot, like five other people. I think in that split second, you know, our primal response is save five for the one, right? I think we've always heard that, like, you know, it's
Right.
worth more
Numbers.
saving more,
Yeah. In numbers. Yeah.
because, but at the end of the day, like, one person can contribute as much as five people can, you know?
Yeah. It's
So
really
like, let's
hard.
say that
Yeah.
one
It just
person
depends. Yeah.
is, you know, I don't know, a leader in a really big company, or something like that. Let's say a doctor, right? A doctor can save five other people, right? A
Right.
doctor can
Yeah.
save lives, right? And so in the five other people, you know, what if they're just, you know, I don't know. I guess I don't want to lower the value of life of another profession, but you know, let's say they're not working. They decide to be unemployed, you know, for some reason because they don't want to work. Well, right now they're not contributing at the moment to any of society's, you know, values or missions, and so they're not doing anything. And so if you knew that in advance,
Yeah.
you know, what would you do?
So here's something that brings to mind. It's called act utilitarianism versus deontology. And the famous philosopher Kant came up with deontology act utilitarianism, I can't remember, but basically act utilitarianism is saying what you're saying, kind of like if they're unemployed, then they
Mm.
have, I guess, less
The
value in a sense.
utility.
So
Yeah.
you would let them die because it goes based on utility, exactly. Whereas deontology and Kant would argue that the intention behind the moral decision matters. Like the intention behind it, and it's like,
Mm.
yeah, that's
Deontology. That's interesting.
yeah,
So
deontology.
how would intention play out in this role?
Well, it's hard to think of one in that example. We can get back to that. But one example that I remember in class was we talked about an old lady helping an old lady cross the street. Like if you're just doing it to like show off in front of people, or because you feel
You're with your
pressured.
girlfriend and you say like, well, I
Yeah.
want to show her that I'm a good guy or something.
Yeah, or even if you feel pressured by society to conform to do it, deontology would argue that that intent is not genuine, so therefore it's not moral. So it's not moral to help her cross the street for that reason. However, if you go with the intent of doing it because it's the right moral thing to do, because she's an old lady and she needs help and you want to protect her safety, then I believe deontology would argue that that is the moral and right thing to do. So it depends on your intention.
Yeah.
So if you apply it to like four patients, I guess the donation thing, the donation dilemma, should I donate a heart to these five unemployed patients or this one person who's like, let's say 15 years old and has their whole life ahead of them? Like,
Yeah.
what would deontology
And the
say?
the only hard thing about that is that it can lead to subjective, thinking.
Exactly, dude. That it can lead to
Because
bias. Yeah,
you can say like, well, what was their intention? Well, you can't measure their intention.
yeah, you can.
Like they gave me $10. Why did they give me $10? Are they trying to get something out of me? Are they, or like let's say like if somebody were to have a kid, and they come up to you and they're like, Daddy, I want $10. And you're like, no, leave me alone. Like, why do you need $10? It's like, Daddy, it's
Yeah,
important. I need $10. Well, maybe the kid, saw, or maybe he was talking to his best friend and he said that his dad had just lost his job, and the little
right,
kid,
right.
to help him out, wanted to get those $10 so that he could give them to his friend because
Yeah,
he knew that he probably needed them more
yeah,
than,
dude. Yeah.
the others.
So context matters then in that sense. And
Yeah.
that's what makes it so complicated. That's what makes this whole debate about objective morality versus subjective morality so incredibly complicated. Because when you dive into like these examples that we talked about, the donation of the heart, the trolley with the two tracks and the five versus one person, it makes it so complicated because when you dive deep into that, you find yourself not sure what to do. At least that's how I
Yeah.
feel. And then we can dive into like, okay, so what are the consequences then if we adopted let's say we adopted subjective morality as a societal framework for morality? What would be the consequences of that? Because then anyone can make up whatever morals they want. You
Yeah.
could justify any immoral thing. You could say, well, killing this person, you shouldn't put me in jail because, like, let's just presuppose that the government adopted this subjective morality as a framework for laws and morality. Well, you shouldn't arrest me for killing this person because I had to do it because I needed money. Or you shouldn't arrest this person for, whatever, all kinds of stuff. You could go into all kinds of avenues with it.
Yeah. Or you see it more nowadays, like let's say for example, they were trying to fight that, men that thought they were women could go into the women's restroom, right? Like if you were a man born as a man, but you in yourself consider yourself a woman, then you could go into the woman's restroom. And they were trying to fight that,
Yeah, it's
or vice
complicated. Yeah.
versa, right? And it's kind of complicated because you're like, well, you know, stalls are not made the same way. Okay, we can make it work, but at the end of the day, like that's gonna confuse a lot of things. It confuses. If you say like, well, if they're a guy but they think they're a woman or they consider themselves a woman, then if we just say subjectivism is okay, then well, it's weird. I don't know.
Yeah, it creates confusion. Like, I mean, I think both sides kind of, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but I think I think a lot of people could agree that it can create some confusion in society, and I've kind of
Yeah.
noticed that a little bit because it is kind of confusing when it's broken
And I
down.
mean, some people can argue that, well, our society has always divided both sexes, right? Like, it's okay in your household, your mom goes to the restroom, you go to the restroom, like your brother goes to the restroom. Okay. But I think in public restrooms, there's several people at the same time, you know?
Right? It opens up the possibility of what I've heard people say of the possibility of putting children kind of in danger, and if you mix two different biological genders or genders, however you want to call it, in the restroom, it can create some concerns from parents about their children being exposed to certain things that children shouldn't be exposed to at certain ages, and I
Yeah.
know people can go back and forth on that, but at least that's one that I thought was very interesting point.
It's pretty cool. And
Yeah.
yeah. Um, but for sure, man. Yeah, I think that's something that, society and people really need to think about. Um, because, subjectivism and relativism, can lead to so many tracks that lead to a lot of confusion, right?
Right.
Because there's certain laws, well, that's my biased opinion, right? The fact that there's certain laws that govern the world, right? And I think that's why a lot of scientists, you can find scientists that are believers in God and not believers in God, as well as philosophers, moralists, that are both in both sides. The reason for that is because, some people say, well, you can have morality without religion, right? And without, I guess, any construct, right? You can learn. Morality is something that you learn, right? And that's why, once I can say honestly, you learn morality. It's something that's learned. It's not given to you, you know. But well, how how if you think about a body, right? Let's say you have a virus inside of your body. Well, your white blood cells, start fighting off that virus. Try to kill it, right? It's naturally their DNA is created to fight off that virus, and so there's certain, I guess, codes, right? DNA codes that how we're constructed, that we're a mother is born caring for a baby, right? It's natural instinct for the majority of women, is to care for their baby, unless they had a rough beginning or a mental issue that innate didn't allow them to do so. But the natural instinct is to care, right? To protect for a mother, right?
Right.
As it is for a human to love, right? It's innate to receive love and be loved, right? And I guess it can also be debated, but it can't go unnoticed that there is certain things that do have some sort of innate in them. And people can say maybe it's evolution. Evolution has created us to be more, to recognize patterns and create music, or has made us, more caring for others. And we realize that through evolution, that when we care for others, we tend to blossom as a society, or something like that, right? Maybe it was evolution that caused it, right? We could go into that rabbit hole,
Yeah, we could.
but
Yeah, that could be a whole other topic for sure. As
yeah,
well as
because it
my
could say
challenge.
like, well, morality has been created over the years.
Right. Yeah, dude. I've looked at all that stuff too. There's so much to talk about. It's crazy, man.
Yeah.
But my biggest challenge, like the last thing I'll say, is like the biggest challenge for me. Uh, Even though I am Christian and I believe in objective morality as a Christian, uh, I guess the outside myself philosophical challenge that I wrestle with a lot is trying to figure out what is the difference between objective things and subjective things. Because in my mind, I guess outside of religion, maybe we can look at that maybe for a second and say, how does society without God define what objective is? You know, and so
Mm-hmm.
what is objective then? So is it just a group of subjective opinions in a group of society, 10 people, 100 people, however many people in the society, and they agree that they all come to a consensus on these subjective opinions, and those subjective opinions transform into an objective belief, I guess, which is
Yeah.
pretty oxymoronic to say, but an objective,
And subjective
whatever, you
meaning
know?
that, it's, I think for a lot of listeners, maybe they've never heard these
Yeah, it's
these
good.
terms, but subjective meaning that every person decides on what they think it's their own truth and
First
their
person
own
point of view. Yeah.
person point of view, and then objective is a group
Yeah.
of people
Yeah.
accepted by several
Well,
others.
and even that's the thing. It could be that. That's my
But
theory.
even that could be
But
subjective too.
but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm wrestling with. Because is objective things in society? Is it just a group of subjective opinions that create something objective, or because objective also means scientific facts. Like that's scientific facts are considered objective, but then it's like not everyone agrees on
I
certain.
guess like what
So
we
it's
can
like,
even say is that objective is whatever we find in every human being across the world.
yeah, it's a combined series of.
Because a lot of people,
It's
a lot of
agreeing on
religions, a
the
lot of
same
people, they
thing.
pray in some sort
Yeah,
of way. They meditate. They do introspection, right?
yeah.
So I guess if in all societies, in all cultures, people have found that introspection is healthy for the human being, then it's an objective truth that should be followed,
Yeah,
right?
and that's what's hard because society could even agree. A society on an island could create their own objective thing that they think is real, but then they go to another place and they find out, oh wait, that's not real compared to
Yeah,
this other society, and that's what makes it so incredibly complicated. But as a Christian, like I can look at the Bible and say these are objective values that I hold
it
true
gives you a
because it's from
structure.
a divine creator. But if I were an atheist and if I adopted that mindset, I would be flabbergasted and be like, how the hell do I explain what objective and
It's almost
subjective
like
is? I don't know
I
how to
feel like it's
define it.
almost like a video
There's so
game
many
because
gray areas.
I think you mentioned something really important, the creator, right? So I don't know if you've seen the Ready Player One, the movie,
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
but they had that main creator who created all the rules within the game that you could do, right? And so, having a creator means that in that creation, there has been certain purpose and things, put into place so that order can be created, order can run, and there is balance, there is flow of things, right? And I think in society, like athletes, they look into like, how can I get into a flow state? Creatives, how can I create, creativity and flow in this state where I'm just constantly making, right? And I think that can lead us. I know we're almost out of time, but that can lead us into you know an idea that the creator gave us these moments, this mission, right? And I think as a Christian, we hear all the time, what's my vocation, what am I meant to do? We pray about these things like, what is it that I am called to do, right? Like a calling, meaning that within that calling there is moral ethics that need to be applied to carry out that mission, right? And so I think there's so much that comes with it, but I think it goes back to that video game idea. Well, the creator puts certain rules within the game so that it's not just even within Grand Theft Auto, where you can almost do a lot of things in there. There's still some rules. There's gravity that keeps people in place. You're not just floating in space. There's objective truths that make a world comprehensible, and it has a certain order of how it works.
Right. One last thing I would like you to touch on is real quick, there wasn't there like a priest that told you a quote or something, or he told you about something related to subjective morality. Like if we just agreed with what everyone said, then
Everything would be possible.
right. I think it was something like that, right?
Yeah, and it was basically about a girl that she it was in a book that he recommended. I can't think of at the top of my head, but she basically went to a party, and she was Christian, believed in God. And she arrives at the party, and basically, they tell her, well, they start having sex right there, right? Like people have sex and all that. And they're like, well, why don't you have sex? Like, are you supposed, like, are you too much of a church girl or this and that? And she didn't know what to respond. And so she came back, and she thought about it for a bit. And then she said, well, everyone can do whatever they want to do, but you know, but in my case, I can choose, basically that relative truth. Well,
Right.
but for
Yeah.
me, that's not for me. That's not for me, basically. And it's almost like morality is being treated like the flavor of an ice cream. That is not for me. I don't like that taste of ice cream. That is not for me.
Yeah. What did that
And
priest tell
so,
you about it?
what did he say?
Yeah. What was the final? He said something. It was really interesting.
I can't remember what the cash line was like at the end,
Yeah. I
where
know,
it
right?
just blew my mind.
I'm trying to
But
remember too.
yeah, I think it was, you know, it makes me think back to Kierkegaard. Like,
Oh,
if there was no God, everything would be possible.
right, dude, right. That's a good line to leave it off of, dude.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely, man.
sounds good.
All
Well,
right.
everyone, thank you very much. If you would like us to keep talking about this topic, please leave comments down below. We want to know if this is something you find interesting. We also have other topics coming up. We're delving a little bit into NFTs, cryptocurrencies, and different stuff like that. I think it's something that's outside of the box for our generation and our time that we're living. So thank you for all watching. And we will see you in the next episode.
All right.
Take care.